Good morning. As we start our general membership meeting that we have every second Saturday from 10 to 12, and we go over the business of the day as well as feature topic of each month. And so I'm going to welcome everyone as they come on to our Zoom as well as our Facebook Live. And I'm going to ask Mindy, who is hosting today, to bring up the agenda for the day before I call it to order. Excellent. Oh, Mindy's, it looks beautiful. Just good job. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and so we can get the business of the day moving, and we can look at the feature of the day with our guest speaker, Miss Alana Matthews, on Racial Justice Act. And so, Mandy, I'm officially calling the meeting to order at 10:01. And at this time, I am going to entertain a motion for us to approve the agenda as presented. That's the motion on the floor that I'm asking to be moved. While we're on Facebook Live and I'm waiting on my executive committee.
I move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second. This is Lynn.
Thank you, Lorraine, for moving it. Thank you, Lynn, for seconding it. Discussion? All in favor? You can raise your electric hands too. Say aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstentions? So moved. At this time, I will be, in the absence of Stacy Anderson, our secretary, our assistant secretary is hosting today, and I will be asking her for the reading and the approval of the minutes of last month's general membership meeting. Mandy, are you available to have that? You might be on mute, Mandy. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the month of May, there were many activities. They're as follows: District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert regarding agreeing to waiving expungement.
Oh, hold on. Oh, that's actually my report, not the minutes.
Oh, the minutes. My apologies. I do have that available. One moment.
That's okay. That's okay. We have many documents and that you are maneuvering through, so I totally understand. So once you find the minutes, we'll go ahead and have you read them. Were you able to find them, Mandy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, this is the general membership meeting minutes from May 8th, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Approval of agenda. Valerie moved, Pastor Big second. Call to order 10 a.m. Correction on minutes, May 17th. CCA should be May 15th. Approved with revision, moved by LaMills, second by Ardell. Treasurer report, Daphna, presented and approved, all bills paid. Prayer breakfast budget money is still coming in, and if you would like a copy, contact Daphna. President report, legislative day on the 17th this month from 9:30 to 3 p.m. Want everyone to register, especially our youth. Gave highlights regarding Tia's presentation. LaMills stated the city council is talking about removing the news from seal and logo, and this is in the city of Placerville, but still hanging on to the nickname Hangtown. Looking at boycott if necessary. Talked about the candidate races and making sure we are represented. Talked about expungement, political action, and criminal justice meeting on 3rd Tuesday of every month. Next is on May 18th. The third Tuesday of June is the next one, actually. Lauren Hammond chimed in about Angelique Ashby running for Senator Dr. Pan's position. Will join the political action committee. Redistricting is coming. 2022 is the election year, and we need to look at seats we would not normally consider. Larissa talked about the danger of lead and other harmful toxins in the water in the North Highland and McClellan area. Has included all the district supervisors in her report. Recommendation for city and council to inform and supply water filters and Brita filters. Also joining the political action committee. Tia making a request for her popcorn drive for the youth program. Please send out your social media outlets. Dates May 19th to 23rd. Nothing on prayer breakfast due to money still coming in. Action, Axel budget approved for the youth for $50. Motion Valerie, second by Ardell. Action, reimbursement of Healthline for $56. Moved by LaMills, second Pastor Banks. Introduction of Ad hoc Cannabis Committee Chair, Raquel Kent. Talked about a moratorium, pushed out to May 25th for District 2. If passed, won't be able to open in District 2 and 6. We're only at 6% for core. Out of 234 businesses, only 16 are Black owned. Announcements, celebrating the 105th year anniversary, barbecue kickoff. Action, moving Juneteenth to Old Sacramento, a 2-day event. The festival location was taken away and given to Dixieland Jazz previously, and now it's back. The motion moved by Stacy, second Pastor Banks. Town Hall, Mental Health, Daphna and Cliff Straley. Introduction of Jennifer Brenner, Blue Shield of California Project Manager over Health Transformation. Adjournment 12 p.m.
Thank you, Mandy, for reading the minutes and presenting them to our general membership on Zoom. At this time, I am going to entertain a motion that we accept the minutes as read and presented by our Assistant Secretary, Mandy.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented by our secretary.
Thank you, Velma. Who gave the second? Well, was that Ardell?
Ardell.
Okay,
Yes.
Ardell gave the second. Discussion. All in favor say aye, or raise your electronic hands and say aye. And opposed? So moved. Do we have a membership report, Madam Secretary?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and table the membership report for next month. And so I'm entertaining a motion that we table the membership report until next month. That's the motion I am entertaining.
I move that the motion be tabled.
It's been moved by Ardell
Second by Velma.
and second by Velma. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. Motion passes. Next, we have the treasurer's report. And I believe that if Daphna is not available, that would be Shirley Brown.
Yes, I have the report here. Everything is paid in full. And as far as from the prayer breakfast,
Mhm.
there was coming in at $4,600, and it was a negative 4,251 with a plus of $348. And they was given a shout out for the American Pacific Mortgage for a donation of $14,000. Our
Okay.
general account.
At this time, Shirley, I believe in the absence of Daphna,
Okay.
we have any details of the treasurer's report can be requested to go to either you or Daphna. And so any member that would like a copy of the treasurer's report, they can email either Daphna or Shirley. Shirley, can you put your email in the chat box as well as state your email out loud for anyone that's listening on Facebook?
Okay. My name is Shirley Brown. My email is followbrown, FOLLOWBROWN @ AOL.com.
Okay, thank you. And also put it in the chat.
Okay.
At this time, we're going to have our president's report, which is kind of, well, you know what? I'm going to do the highlights of the treasury report because it's a lot. I mean, I'm not the treasury report, the president's report, because it's a lot. And recently, the internal inspector general, I'm sorry, gave a report earlier in May regarding his findings of the Sacramento County sheriffs. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that, one, I found it to be unacceptable as far as the report that was given to Sacramento County. Some of the things that were highlighted that were unacceptable were things like the body camera that they recently received from the county that the Sacramento branch pushed for them to have. And in having those, he just simply put something like, we will have a training program regarding the body cameras, which is unacceptable. What we are demanding is that they have a criteria for the body cams. So, for example, you are to keep them on unless a supervisor tells you to turn them off. When to turn them on, when to turn them off, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. There's no criteria as of now based on that report. There were excessive force recommendations, which simply said that they would do more communications and make sure information is out there for the public and the officers. There was nothing in there for accountability for excessive force with the officers. There were just a number of things that were disturbing to me as far as recommendations from our new inspector general. And it would have been great if he would have engaged the community and the civil rights organizations like the Sacramento NAACP or other like NAN or ACLU. None of them were engaged in any of the recommendations as far as policy changes when it comes to complaints. Even when it came to citizen complaints, it was more about the internal communication to each other versus the accountability of the officers when a person contacted them. So we, as NAACP, were not pleased with that. So we did share our dissatisfaction with the Sheriff's Department. And I'm working with our second Vice President, Ken Nelson, to resolve some of those issues. And if you could, Mandy, scroll down much further past that, because that's you can always go on the website and look for our various reports. But also, I had a meeting with Mayor Steinberg regarding our housing issue and the crisis, and working closer together to resolve that issue. It appears to be getting worse than getting better. And so there were a number of ideas that we worked with. And so I'm going to have him work with our housing chair, Tanisha Broadway, as well as some of the ideas that we were discussing. Something like a gap plan for individuals who work every day, but can't afford to get into an apartment based on the existing policy that you have to make 3 times the rent. And if the rent is somewhere between $1,600 to $1,800 a month, and you're making a minimum wage of $15 an hour, you will never be able to get into a place. And so the thought process was probably creating something called a gap plan. So individuals who are working maybe could afford $1,000 to $1,200 a month, but can't afford the 16 to 18. The gap plan would supply that additional money to pay so that they can live in an affordable housing area. Met with the CPS director regarding changing policies for drug and background checks. 40% of African Americans are in, young people are in the CPS system. African Americans, 40%. Half of our children are in that system. and they're not coming out as fast as their white counterparts. They shared with me a recent graduation of CPS kids coming out of the system, and they were all white. And the judge noticed he basically said, we have a celebration here of kids who were able to get out of the system, but there's a glaring problem that there's no children of color in this celebration. So that's a problem. So we have been working with CPS on doing some policy changes, one of which the drug policy. Children who are with Black parents or relatives that are engaged in any kind of marijuana are not allowed to have their children back, but with their white counterparts, they are. Background checks, children who are with Black families are not allowed to have siblings, even if they had something as far back as 20 years ago. It could have been a DUI 20 years ago, and they're not allowed where white counterparts are. So we're looking to change those policies. Also, in working with the Sacramento County, it was discovered during their dine-in program that no Black restaurants were chosen to participate in this program. Although the Sacramento County was given $7 million were allocated, and $7 million were given to 15 restaurants to split. Not one single Black restaurant was ever considered or asked to partner. And so we have asked for an investigation and to look into this because there's new money coming into Sacramento County. And so we want to make sure that this wrong that they did is corrected. And we don't understand why. Actually, I do understand. If you're using the same method, you're going to get the same results. And so the same old folks that continue to get the money from the city of Sacramento or county of Sacramento will get the money unless we create a voice for them to make sure that they have that money. And we talked about the secretary's meetings and the R&B. And I'm not sure if LaMills is on here. And if not, I'll talk about our meeting with our situation with the chief of fire department. So a couple of months ago or a month ago, we made the decision and voted unanimously to call for the firing of the chief of fire department because of African American, the few that we have who are firemen have resigned due to discrimination and a lack of support within the city. And so since then, I can say our political action and criminal justice chair, LaMills, has been working with the individual that resigned and working with the city attorney as well as the labor union person. I have been in touch with the city manager and asked for a meeting. So at this time, we are looking for one of those officers, fire officers, to return back to his position. And we are working with them to make sure that things are in place so what he went through before won't happen again. So we are in full negotiations. I'm working one in with the city manager and have a meeting scheduled with the fire chief, and LaMills has continued to work with the actual employee of the fire department. So I'm going to pause at this time. I know I gave you a lot of information for many of the things that we have been doing with the Sacramento branch of the NAACP, and if there's any questions regarding any part of my report. Well, if there's no questions, that means I must have done a good job.
You did a great job. Thank you. Can someone let the people in the waiting room in, please?
Thank you for making that happen. The unfinished business, we had the prayer breakfast report, and that's still being resolved. The status of the fire chief, I did just explain what we're doing there. We did vote to move the R&B Festival to Old Sacramento, and Velma Sykes is the chair of that particular event. And I know she has started to have a meeting with some of our sponsors and individuals in Old Sacramento. And so I'm going to give Velma a chance to update our community based on her meeting that she just had this past week. Velma?
Good or morning, everyone. Thank you so much, President. Yes, we did have a meeting on last week with the major sponsor of the event in Old Sacramento. It turns out that it looks like we're going to have a fabulous event. Anyone interested in joining the committee, please feel free to contact me at sykesv1@gmail.com. And what that will entail is weekly meetings in Old Sacramento, and we will also be holding it over Zoom at the House of Soul on Wednesday evenings at 6 o'clock. An announcement will be coming forth on this event. But it's looking like it's going to turn out to be a great event. We're hoping to be able to close the street in front of the garage beside the House of Soul and use that side street along with the grassy area behind the building for some really fun activities and great music and wonderful food. So again, if you're interested in joining the committee to help put on this event, we're looking for some volunteers. Please contact me you can call me at 916-271-2286 or email me at sykesv1@gmail.com, and I will put both in the chat.
Excuse me?
Thank you.
Alana Matthews is in the waiting room.
Well, she says that she did say that, and that's why I asked that they open up the waiting room, but they're saying that they don't see her. So I'm going to text her and see if she has the wrong login, maybe.
Mandy, are you saying that she is in the waiting room?
We do not see anyone in the waiting room at this time.
Okay, okay. Just want to make sure.
There is I could send the link to you, Velma, to send.
Excellent. Before we go to new business, under old business, we have a couple of action items. And so we are going to have our national NAACP convention, and it's going to be virtual. And so those dates are July 6th through July 14th. And in order to participate in the convention, we need delegates. Because of the size of our branch, the Greater Sacramento branch is allowed to have up to 8 delegates. And we can have 8 alternates, and you can also be observers. This is a 2-part, well, I'm going to make it a 1-part action item. There were some names that were presented for the 8 delegates and 1 name for the youth. And so I am at this point, I'm going to entertain a motion that we accept the names that were presented. Let me back up before I go into that motion. Also, anyone that's part of Zoom or even part of the Facebook Live, you may want to inbox me if you are interested in becoming a alternate. And so what that means, if you're an alternate for the NAACP, that means any delegate that can't make it, you would take their spot. The difference between an alternate and a delegate, you have all access to everything else. The only thing an alternate cannot do is vote. Delegates can vote, alternates cannot, observers cannot, delegates can vote. So I want to explain that before I move forward with the motion. So at this time, I'm going to entertain a motion that the names that were submitted for delegates and including the youth are Malachi Smith, Larissa Wells, Betty Williams, Stacy Anderson, Velma Sykes, Pastor Banks, Ken Nelson, Roy Kaufman, and Jalil Baker. I'm entertaining a motion that we accept those following names for delegates for the National NAACP Convention. That's the motion I'm presenting. Or entertaining, sorry.
I move to accept the names that were presented.
Ardell has moved the motion for the names to be represented. Do I have a second?
Lynn Berkeley Baskins, second the motion.
Lynn has second. Any discussion or questions regarding this event? Okay, if none, we will go ahead. I'm going to call for the motion. So all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. The second part of that motion, we had agreed to pay for registration for delegates only. So, and the amount of registration is $30. So I'm going to entertain a motion that we agree to pay the registration fee for all the delegates at $30 per person, not alternates, not observers, but delegates only. So I'm entertaining a motion to accept the registration for the branch to pay the registration fee for all the delegates. That's the motion I'm entertaining.
Aye.
I move to
Okay.
pay. I move to pay for the delegates as presented.
Thank you, Ardell. Ardell has moved the motion. Do I have a second? Don't y'all speak at once.
Lynn Berkeley Baskins, second the motion.
It's been second, properly second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. So the next action item that we had agreed to participate in the Juneteenth event at William Lynn Park for a $200 booth. And so I'm entertaining a motion that we accept the payment, or to approve the payment of $200 for the booth for Juneteenth on June 19th at William Lynn Park. That's the motion I'm entertaining.
I move that we approve the expenditure of $200 for the Juneteenth event in Land Park on the 19th.
Thank you, Velma. Do I have a second? Ardell Harrison has second. Any discussion? The only discussion I'm going to add to this is that Deshanis Gray is the lead person for this event. And we're also, well, let me close out this motion. Did I call it? All in favor say aye? I can't remember. Okay, all in favor say aye. Thank you,
Aye.
Velma. Opposed?
Aye.
So moved. So the only other thing, it's not to the motion itself, but there's a number of events that's happening for Juneteenth. So I know that there's going to be an event at the Capitol as well as Oak Park. Oak Park will be closing off streets and having an event there on the 19th as well. We will have a presence at the Harrison Center, formerly known as the Blues Cafe. And so we will have a presence there as well as the event on the 19th. Now, Ardell, do you have any additional information you would like to share for the Oak Park event not the Oak Park. Yeah, the Oak Park event.
Yes, Betty. I've been in communication with Kevin Johnson's administration and just kind of coordinating things. We will have a present there, and we won't have a booth per se, but one of the things that they were asking is that the Black wine vendors participate to expose that and let them know more about it. And also we'll be introducing the tiny house. And I will have my membership agreements there and try to sign up anybody that's willing to sign up for the NAACP.
Okay, thank you. And I also, you reminded me, so we are having a membership drive, and so we are inviting any and everyone to join the NAACP. We have been a fixture in this community for 105 years. And so we're asking you to continue to support the NAACP by joining us and being a member. It only costs $30 for a one-year membership or $750 for a lifetime membership. And there's information at the bottom of this agenda if you would like to visit our website at naacpsac.com. And then once you go into our website, you would just simply click on membership and follow the directions from there. So while you're listening, you can use your phones or whatever app that you have available to join the NAACP. We get several, I even hate to say Lynn is probably pulling her hair out with the number of calls that we get, but we average close to 5,000, 3,300 to 5,000 a year. And we are 100% volunteer organization. No one gets paid here, no one. And so membership is our power. Membership helps us to grow. And so we would like to continue to have that to grow. Did LaMills make it to?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
He did make it. Okay. I did touch on the fire piece a little bit. If you want to give an update on that and anything with the updates of criminal justice. And then three things. I'm normally going to have a couple of highlights. Larissa will touch on what her latest update on water and those issues. And there was another person. Can't think of it right now. So I'm going to go with you, LaMills, and then Larissa be prepared after LaMills. Thank you.
Okay, Betty. The Political Action and Criminal Justice Committee met on May 18th. And in that, I'll be brief in what we reviewed. We spoke about the lobby day that I already gave an update on lobby day, and then spoke of the work that we're now beginning regarding candidate forums focused on California Senate District 6, Sacramento District Attorney, and Sacramento Sheriff. We also spoke to some of the requests that was coming in for help we had at least one campaign ask for help. And then it's important, as I said it on that call, I'll say it here as well, is that we do not endorse any candidates as the Sacramento, or actually as the NAACP period, regardless of what district we're in or what city we're in. However, if campaigns do have specific asks for help, we will look at opportunities for education in terms of educating members of the community or of our committees on how campaigns run, and get them involved with some of those activities so that they'll understand how to move forward with those. So we had one request in from Dr. Dante Early West in her campaign for a campaign coordinator. Then in Placerville, we're now running down the path of preparing letters for elected officials, as well as making sure that we have clarification on the process for approval for boycott. In the event that we have to go there, we are expecting that we'll probably have to go there based upon their reactions to date, but we are looking to resolve those. And if that is the case, our goal would be for that to happen in the fall. On criminal justice, we're hoping, well, actually, we didn't get a chance to go through many of the components of open cases, which you just referenced, Lynn. Lynn and now an intern that she has with are doing a phenomenal job there. I did not have a count. And I think Lynn sometimes gives us an update on that. And they're doing a great job there altogether. And we're also looking to include some of our key partners like Decarcerate Sacramento, Justice to Jobs, et cetera, to provide updates. We weren't able to at this last meeting, but we'll be looking for that. And then we spoke about with the fire department that you referenced. We're now in, I should say, we are now in negotiations, essentially as an agent of the young fighter who was yet to complete the probationary period, as well as with the city manager's office, the attorney on behalf of the city manager's office, and representative from the fire department. And we've now had 2 meetings. There's a set of 6 criteria, or at least recommendations, as we're calling them, to put in place to make sure that we keep negotiations moving with regards to the potential return of the firefighter who left as a result of trauma from racism and hostile environment within the fire department. We actually just had our 2nd meeting yesterday, and so there was some pushback from the fire department slash city, I should say, on, I shouldn't say fire department, actually the city, with regard to some of the recommendations that we put forth. We provided additional explanation of the importance of those. For the community here with the Sacramento NAACP, I think the 2 pieces that are important to note is we are calling for the city slash fire department to present to our public meetings, our town hall, the outcomes of the actions in terms of their investigation, as well as things that they're doing to make changes going forward so that the African-American community feels safe, recommending anyone to actually join the fire department and to be a part of that environment, knowing what has come out. That is one of the asks. And then the second ask that sits strongly with us is during the recommended probationary period that they would have the firefighter on who bravely came forward to air his complaints and issues, that we would have a monthly meeting going over the diversity goals and actions that's being taken place within the fire department during the duration of his probationary period. And this provides a basic level of oversight and interaction and engagement. Those 2 things they pushed back on. After getting further explanation, they said they'd go back and reconsider and have discussions on them. And so, and there's a discussion with regards to the probationary period. Our approach is that the probationary period in hand be treated as if it was an interruption of duty based upon an injury, i.e. that injury being trauma from the racist and hostile environment that was presented to the young person. Currently, they are viewing the probationary period as a leaving altogether, a resignation, no longer as a part of the force, and expecting there to be a full 12-month probationary period, which is a non-starter for us. And so that's a summary on the things that we've been up to and what's going on from the political action and criminal justice side. And I'll also note that there is incremental work that's being done by Lynn that directly impacts criminal justice on a daily basis. And I can't keep up because Lynn does more work in a week than I do in 2 months. And so if Lynn wants to pipe in and give some of that, I completely welcome that as well.
Absolutely, Lynn.
Gosh, I didn't prepare, but I can just off the cuff say that we are regularly getting phone calls about CPS and about the jail. Those are 2 huge ones. We're also starting to get more calls. I know this is off task a bit, but just to update folks about housing. People are not being able, and Betty, you talked about this in your report, and I love the fact that you're negotiating with the city. We're hearing it from county folks too. But as far as the individual cases, I think right now I have 7 cases. All of them are criminal justice related. We have people in the jail and we don't have anyone who can help the folks in the jail. So they're basically writing letters to get help because when they call, if I can't answer, they can't call back just because, I can't call them back. So we have some issues with that. I will say that one of the problems with the jail, of course, is the pretrial, and we've been working on that a lot, is that there are folks who are sitting in the jail pre-trial. 70% of our jail are people who have not been convicted of any crime. And like Betty said, this 40% is a magic number. It's almost 40% of the jail is also, are also people who are Black. And so I think that's an important note to make. And Lamels, is there anything in particular? I mean, this is so much. I can also say that at the state level right now, they're looking to, this might be big, the governor has proposed $140 million in his May revise to invest in a whole new probation pretrial system that will become permanent in the state. And we know that probation actually puts more people back in jail than helps them to get services. And so on a statewide basis, a lot of people have been talking to the governor to try and convince him that that won't work, and including the House of, well, both houses, so both our Assembly and our Senate have voted it down against the will of the governor. So right now they're behind closed doors negotiating. So I think moving forward, be looking this week, they're going to be putting out the final budget, in theory at least. And you know, if they do fund the probation programs throughout the state, we're in a lot of trouble.
Lynn, you have continually worked. I mean, I have a team that's just awesome. What you guys bring to the table all the time. But one of the things that you recently stated were the phone calls are so many, you can't get to all of them, especially the jail ones, and you can't call them back. And so one of the things that we implemented a long time ago, and we probably need to utilize more, and probably need to bring it into Lamil's committee and bring you in, Lynn and Ken and some others, where a few years back I was able to negotiate NAACP representatives to go into the jail. And so, which means if we go in as representatives of NAACP on behalf of the inmates, we will not be taking away their privileges from their family and friends to visit them. We would have almost the same privileges as an attorney. The difference would be we are still being recorded, attorneys would not. And so my thought process is that we probably need to pull that group together so that we can actually, and I know because of COVID, there's been some challenges going into the jail, but we probably need to pull a core group together to go into the jail and to address some of those issues with those inmates as well. So let's talk about what we can do.
Thank you, Ms.
Make
Betty.
that
Also,
happen.
I don't know if you have a relationship in El Dorado County, but a lot of these are coming from El Dorado County Jail.
I
know, I know, but I just thought I'd throw that out
there. But you know, we can.
Yeah,
they know me.
I'm glad to help with that, Betty, because I'm dealing a lot with El Dorado County as a part of the work that we're doing in Placerville right now. So
let's do it then.
Seems there's a theme in Placer County.
Well, we can create our own theme. We'll bring a new theme about. How about that?
There you go.
Like I'm looking at the time because I know we have a guest starting at 11 o'clock, but thank you for that report, both Lamils and Lynn, the L&L team. So I am, another L, Larissa, the triple L's. I'm going to ask Larissa to give her overview of, she's our environmental justice chair, something new that we've really haven't utilized in the past years. And I tell you, I chose the right person for this particular committee because she's bringing a vast of information that we are going to be bringing action to that. So Larissa, can you give us a summary?
Yes, I can. But before I get started, in regards to the funding that they spoke about, the probation department, I'm looking at the 21-22 budget that's been approved by the County Board of Supervisors, and $5 million to fund the probation department's monitor pre-child release program, and 6.8 to fund the continued efforts to meet allegedly county obligations under the Mays consent decree.
Yes,
Just thought I'd put.
Allegedly, but I'm not going to go down that road.
I
Because
just said
that's not what
allegedly.
you're
Well,
here
I didn't
for,
say allegedly.
Larissa.
You said allegedly. So let me get to my report. I
Thank
was
you.
just because I was just looking at that yesterday, and I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, hi everybody. My name's Larissa, and what I spoke about just briefly, I spoke about the water, and I also spoke about we've been speaking about the lead in the water. Let me also say that the EPA has also stated that emphatically that there is a the lead level should be at 0. There's no safe lead. However, in speaking, let me just back up. There's also been chromium 6 found in the water as well, which causes cancer. And I have been mentioning about North Highlands having an astronomical amount of lead, chromium 6, and arsenic in the water, of which no one is really being informed. I did speak with the principal engineer technician for the water board for this city and county of Sacramento. He also stated that there is something else called PFAS that's also in the water. That's polyfluoroalkyl, whatever. I'm not a scientist. However, what this means is those bottles, plastic bottles that we're putting in the trash or whatnot, there are slivers of the plastic that's actually in the water that the EPA is not monitoring. And recently, according to Mr. Wiley, Aaron Wiley with the board, there have been high levels of this substance found in women's breast milk, which means that they are breastfeeding their children with these pieces of plastic inside. And also, what I also spoke about are the effects in regards to children regarding lead, behavior and learning problems, low IQ and hyperactivity, slowed growth, hearing problems, and anemia. It can even cause death, seizures, and comas. It makes me think of autism and if there is a relation between the water and autism, because we just really came across autism in the past 15, 20 years strongly. Also, it can result in premature death, reduced growth of fetus. It's all kinds of things that can happen with this. In adults, it's cardiovascular effects, increased blood pressure, incidence of hypertension. So if you find yourself constantly having sore muscles, this can also be in relation to the lead that is found in the water. Now, the water board or whatever says that it is suggested that you run your water cold, because a lot of people cook with water. But the thing is, you can't boil the water. We used to growing up boiling the water, but that only removes the bacteria, it does not remove the lead. In fact, when you boil the water, it intensifies the lead that's actually in there. So he says, run the water cold, especially if you haven't used your water in a few hours, run it for about 90 seconds. Well, I did that in my particular building that I live in. And it did come out a little cleaner when I put the little testing kit in there. However, I came back 15 minutes later and it was even more purple than it had been, which means lead. So if you happen to live in your home and your pipes are old, you might want to check that out. And some of the things that I'm thinking about is approaching the city and county of Sacramento, and especially since the people in the rural areas and low income folk are the ones that Black and brown and poor white folks too, that since they have not informed people adequately or whatnot, that they provide Brita containers along with at least, like a starter kit, 2 filters to get started. And that needs to be just given away in addition to education to the public so that they know what is going on, especially with the 326 contaminated sites by McLennan Park. Thank you.
Okay. Ever since Larissa has been giving us these reports on a monthly basis, I'm hearing my executive committee members saying that they are relooking at even the ice cubes that they put in their drinks at after 5 o'clock every day. So it's interesting that she would talk about boiling water. That's what we've been used to. And she did say it will kill bacteria, but it intensifies lead, which we never thought about before. So one of the things that we talked about in the executive committee is there's no labeling of this right now. There's no warnings that tell individuals what's the capacity of bacteria or lead. And so that's something that, as far as one of the action items with the Environmental Justice Committee, we want to look at possibly pushing to have labels, even if it's on the water bills or however that is. Velma, you have your hand up?
Yes, I had a question for Larissa.
Yes.
Where can we find testing equipment to test our, individual water, or is that, available? And is that something we can get the city or county or whomever to give to us in order to test our water? People like me have no idea where to get stuff like that, or that's even available. So can you please give us some answers?
Thank you, Miss Velma. What I suggest is what I did was it actually came from a neighbor. I just went through Amazon, and yes, Amazon has a few different testing kits that are available that will test for up to 17 contaminants and or minerals in your water, but more contaminants. And what before the argument comes, well, that's just an Amazon testing kit. Yeah, I've also included the tables that come directly from the city and county of Sacramento of what they have found actually in the water. Now, let me also say this. And yes, I'm in total agreement of the city and county of Sacramento, especially since they've approved this budget and whatnot, then some of that budget needs to go to educating the people, testing kits and filters. And like I said, starter kits in order to get them, or you're gonna have to supply the water. And in light of what Madam President, Ms. Betty Williams stated, they put the warning labels on the cigarettes, that kills you. So how about the water? And in the state of California, it is very prevalent, but it's not being talked about, because if this gets talked about, then that means that the water purveyors that we happen to have currently, they would actually have to do more testing to remove more things. It's going to cost more money, and that price cost goes to the consumers. So then that means our water bills go up. So what are we all to do? So we need to sit, it would be a great thing to sit down with the city and county of Sacramento Board of Supervisors. They control the budget. Well, what is it that we're going to do?
Right.
Yeah, so that's my take on that. But yes, to answer your question directly, yes, there are testing kits available. What I can do while we're still on the meeting, I have, because I'm going to jump off for a minute and come back on, I'm going to supply some of the products that I found and the one that I have utilized, and put it in there so that you can see for yourself.
You're going to put it in the chat, the information?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Can you also include like a range in cost, how much this might, affect us individually, economically? What the effect is for us to even do this individually, because it may be something that in this climate, a lot of people may not be able to afford, and it's not fair for them not to have it just because it's unaffordable, or it's on Amazon and they're unable to go through Amazon, or various and sundry reasons why it's not available to our community.
We could do that, yes, because it is written, the people perish because of a lack of knowledge, and so therefore the knowledge is not being given to us, and what are we doing? We're perishing. However, what I will say is this: in addition to the city and county of Sacramento, with that fight, it would be a wonderful thing to have sponsorships with, let's say, like Brita or PUR or Pure, rather, not PUR.
Absolutely.
Pure. Yeah, it would be a wonderful thing, and that's a tax write-off for them, and they look really good. They love to talk about themselves. That's what I've learned. So that's something that I'm actually going to actively seek out and see when this is going to happen, not how, but when.
I would love to help you with
Change the
that.
narrative, and we change the narrative. I mean, change the language, we change the narrative.
Good.
Larissa, could you put your email in the chat? So,
Yes.
and
if anybody
say
wants
it
that,
out loud.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
And say
I'm
it
sorry.
out loud since we're on Facebook Live as well.
Okay, so my email address is WELLS, like Sam, and LAURISSA, all one word. It's just my last name and my first name at gmail.com. So wellslarissa@gmail.com. And the range for these testing kits, by the way, ranges from $25 to up and up. But I'll put these things in the chat. And what I don't manage to get in by 11 a.m., I will return at 11:30 a.m. and I will put those items in there before we close.
Thank you. We have another question from Lynn.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, they just put those air monitors in Oak Park and in the north area. And I'm wondering, does that coincide with the same zip codes you're finding the water issues in?
Say it again now.
So they the city just put air quality monitors in both Oak Park and the north area. And I'm wondering if those are the same areas where you're seeing the water discrepancies.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering, whoever did that air quality monitor, whoever pushed for that, we might decide, I don't know, but it might be worthwhile to find out who that is so that we can, partner, build capacity around those areas in particular.
Well, if it's one thing I learned that's a great asset working with the census is partnership. And so, yes, I am so here for it. If you can go ahead and if you can remember any of that information, please send it to me, or let's just communicate. Actually, I'll speak
Larissa,
with you.
I think you have one more question too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hello.
No, but first, Lynn, did she answer your question?
Yes, and I'll look for those people.
Okay, Chris Jones has a question.
Yeah, not so much a question, just a add in to what was just being discussed. So as far as the air quality monitors over in Oak Park, Adrian Wren is a big player in that through the Oak Park Neighborhood Association. I just wanted to share that so you guys were aware.
I'm sorry, Adrian who?
Wren, R-E-H-N.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. And so before we close out this section, under new business redistricting, a couple of things. Lauren Hammond, be prepared to speak on this for a second. But before we do that, redistricting outreach and funding is available through the City of Sacramento. And so if you just go through the City of Sacramento website and do the search for redistricting, and you really have to follow through and scroll all the way down. And so what the purpose is, and I'm in the process of processing the paperwork or the online system for Greater Sacramento and NAACP, but I also want to share this information because the city is anyone that could share information regarding redistricting will get anywhere from $250 to $5,000 to do outreach. And so if that's something that you feel that you can do, whether you are a CBO, a community-based organization, or a private company or an individual, they will pay you to do outreach or to teach about the redistricting process and the importance of redistricting. This is where they use the information from the census to draw the lines for our city and our county. And so if we want to make sure that our community stays intact, or we want to make sure that the lines are drawn to make sure that we have the information that's needed, or the resources is a better word, that's needed for our communities, we need to get involved and we need to make sure that our voice is being heard. But a lot of times we don't know about the money that's on the table. And so I want everyone from the sound of my voice, whether it's in Zoom or Facebook, to please, even today afterwards, go to the city website, fill out the paperwork, and say what, and it's okay if you're just an individual and you're not connected with an organization or business, you can receive money to do outreach for this. And so someone has anyway. Um, and I spoke to Lauren, because Lauren has been part of census and redistricting, and I believe her business is mapping. And so I just wanted her to touch briefly on the importance of redistricting, and then I'm going to turn it over to Velma to introduce our guest of honor. Lauren, are you still there?
Yeah.
You are on.
Let me just say, Betty, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm more than happy to work with the NAACP as I have since 1991. And when you look around your neighborhood and think about what you need and what you're not getting, you look to your representative. And sometimes in the city of Sacramento, equally important, the county, you wonder, well, how did they get elected? They don't know anything about my neighborhood.
Mm.
This is your opportunity to make a difference. Now, the city has made a point of having outreach because of the ugly things that happened in the last redistricting in 2011. But this is going on at the state level with that redistricting commission, and at the federal level, because that same commission that draws the assembly districts, the Senate districts, Board of Equalization also does Congress. At the local level, it took redistricting to get a Black person on city council. It took redistricting to get 4 people, Black people, on city council. We'll never probably have that number again. And because the unincorporated county snakes through the middle of the city along Highway 99, it's very difficult to redraw, but it has to be done. So, Betty, I will work with you either on the application or trying to get the money, because quite frankly, the NAACP is the biggest organization in the African-American community that has you're known for getting people out. And we can do this just like we did with the census. And it's probably the cheapest you'll ever be able to get me. So let's do it for the right reason.
Thank you, former City Council member Lauren Hammond. I appreciate you always. At this time, I'm going to reintroduce my Vice President, Velma Sykes, who's going to introduce our guest of the hour. And we will go from there. Miss Velma Sykes. Velma? Okay, we can't find Velma. So then I will introduce our guest of honor.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was speaking, but on mute.
Okay.
I
Go
apologize.
Ahead, Velma.
Okay. My name is Velma Sykes, and I am the 3rd Vice President of the NAACP and Chair of Women in NAACP. WIN's mission is to serve as an advocacy vehicle to address the social, economic, political, educational, health, and welfare issues affecting women and our families, to advocate for the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual development of our children, and to support the policies as well as the ongoing mission and vision of the NAACP. We invite you to join us. You must be a member of the NAACP. Our membership is an additional $10 a year. I'm happy to present Elena Matthews to make a very special presentation on the California Racial Justice Act, which will provide an overview of this new law that seeks to eliminate racial discrimination from criminal prosecution. Her presentation will cover the scope and limits of the act, as well as what the California Racial Justice Act means for people accused of a crime, survivors, the community, and criminal justice agencies. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Elena. Elena Matthews is the Director of Training and Resources for the Prosecutors Alliance of California. She's an attorney and political policy expert who began her legal career as a deputy district attorney for the Sacramento County, where she tried more than 50 trials to verdict. She gained extensive public policy experience after being appointed public advisor for the California Energy Commission, by Governor Brown, where she led the implementation of several equity initiatives, investments, and programs. She expanded this work as the chief consultant to the Joint Legislative Committee on Climate Change. Ms. Matthews also serves as adjunct professor at McGeorge School of Law, where she teaches implicit bias and the law and racial justice and equity courses. She holds a JD and an LLM from McGeorge School of Law and a BA in philosophy from Spelman College. She's a proud Army wife and mom of 3. I present to you Elena Matthews. Elena.
Thank you for that great introduction. And I'm going to try to share my screen. Oh, it says I don't have the privilege to do that yet. Okay, here we go. All right. Can everyone see that? If you can, just give me a thumbs up so I know that what I'm seeing on my screen, you can see as well. Great. So I want to talk to you about a new law that was passed last year, and it started, it's in effect January 1st of this year, and it's to help confront racism in our California courts, and that's called the California Racial Justice Act. Since you got that wonderful long introduction about me, I won't go over my credentials, but I will say that it's important. And while this law might not be perfect, it is a current start. And so it applies when it was passed last year, it's going prospectively, which means all cases starting January 1st and on. But there is a bill in the legislature now that makes this act retroactively. So what does the Racial Justice Act do? And I just call it RJA. So there is a ruling in the 80s over the McCleskey versus Kemp case. And that was a case out of Georgia. Oh, I'm sorry, let me say one other thing. If there are any attorneys who are watching this, you are eligible for MCLE credit. If you are joining by Facebook, please put your bar number and your name and your email address in the chat. If you are watching this live stream, I will have my email at the end. So simply just email me, Alana at Prosecutors Alliance, and I will make sure once we get approved for MCLE credit that I can pass that on to you. So I did want to just make that one short housekeeping matter. Okay. So getting back to this law. So we start off, it's good to get some background, and that was the McCleskey versus Kemp case. And that was involving a death penalty case where there was a Black defendant and a white woman. And just to really give you the condensed version, there was information that was presented showing the statistical data, the stats of how unfairly and how often African-American men are sentenced to death. And basically, the Supreme Court ruled that statistical data alone is not enough to prove racial discrimination. And that has been argued by many scholars as one of the worst rulings from the Supreme Court. Justice Powell, who wrote that opinion, actually said that was one of his greatest regrets during his time on the Supreme Court. So the California Racial Justice Act seeks to overturn that and basically saying that no, statistical data can show racial discrimination, and that should be enough. So it is what the, and actually in that Supreme Court opinion, they kind of defer to say, well, we'll let state legislatures figure it out. So it took almost over 25 years, but California took them up on that, and that's how we got the law. So what does the law do? In addition to explicit bias, the Racial Justice Act prohibits implicit bias, racially coded language, dog whistles, as we currently say sometimes, and racial disparities in charges, convictions, and sentencing. And number two, the second thing that we want to know what the law does, if a violation of this act is shown, it is considered a miscarriage of justice, and the harmless error rule does not apply. And the harmless error rule is simply sometimes there might be a violation, but if in the eyes of the law is that it doesn't essentially affect the outcome, such as a guilty verdict or a disparate sentence, it's considered harmless and nothing happens. So with the Racial Justice Act, you do have a remedy. It's not considered harmless. So if anyone is convicted, they can seek to have that conviction overturned, and there are some other remedies. And I think this is important. Why I am glad to partner with the NAACP to offer this is because you're going to learn a lot of the rights that the defendants have, anyone who is accused of a crime. But it also puts the burden on them. So we're going to learn all the pieces of the Racial Justice Act, how racial bias can enter. Well, what if it's your own attorney representing you? How are you supposed to raise that? Or even if you have an encounter with the police. So it's important that the community knows that this act is in effect so that they can raise it. They can inform their attorney, or they can inform the court at whatever appropriate stage it can be. But if we don't know about the law, how can we, or if a defendant doesn't know about the law, how can they exercise their rights under it? So going back to the legislative intent, I'll start with that. And I'm sorry, you guys, normally when I do presentations, I have lots of, graphics, but this is just the law. So it's kind of wordy. I'll try to, fit in some good stories to make it a little bit interesting, but it is wordy. But I intentionally use this presentation because I think it's important for us to get the language precise so that we know what our rights are and we can share it with other community members. So the law says in its legislative intent that its purpose is to ensure that race plays no role at all in seeking or obtaining convictions or in sentencing. It is the intent of the legislature to reject the conclusion that racial disparities within our criminal justice system are inevitable and to actively work to eradicate them. The primary purpose, again, going from the legislative intent, is to seek to eradicate all forms of racial discrimination from our criminal courts and to ensure equal justice for all. So the Racial Justice Act identifies 4 forms of racial discrimination which can be challenged. The first is exhibited bias or animus, anger or negative thoughts. The second is using racially discriminatory language. The third is racial disparities in charging. And the fourth is racial disparity in sentencing. So I'm going to go through each one of these 4 forms of discrimination, but just know that if we're taking notes, the Racial Justice Act identifies 4 forms of racial discrimination. So one, it's very blatant, just demonstrated bias or animus. The second is using racially discriminatory language. And then 3 and 4 are dealing with disparities in charging and sentencing. So let's go on. So the first one, sorry, let me move some of my Zoom stuff is blocking it. The key element for this is that it is exhibited bias toward the defendant. So that has to be, pretty self-explanatory. If you maybe hear something or animus directed towards someone else, it's not towards the defendant or just a general statement that's made. It has to have a connection directly to the defendant. This type of bias does not have to be in court, and it doesn't have to be in trial. So this is important because when you're talking about who the Racial Justice Act applies to, when we're looking at that first form, it can be the judge, the DA, the public defender, a juror, a witness, a police officer. And so it's important that it does not have to be in court or during trial, because it could be, exhibited bias or animus during the encounter with law enforcement. So what would be included? here are two examples. Let's say Donald Ames is a racist defense attorney, or a judge saying the black defendant that to a black defendant that he believes black people commit more crimes. Oh, sorry, I think I went up, sorry. Okay, number two, and I will just say that if anyone with the administrative team, if there are any questions that are arising in the chat, please bring that to my attention, or we'll hold off to the end because I'm not able to see the chat to monitor. Number two, the second form of bias that is covered under the Racial Justice Act is that an actor used racially discriminatory language in court during trial. So the first one, we said it could happen at any time. It doesn't have to happen in court or in trial. It could have happened on the street. It could have happened in the hallway. It could have happened, you know, at the lunch down the street from the courthouse. But for number two, the discriminatory language has to be in court and it has to be during trial. So again, the definition is racially discriminatory language means language that to an objective observer explicitly or implicitly appeals to racial bias. Including but not limited to racially charged or racially coded language, language that compares the defendant to an animal, or language that references the defendant's physical appearance, culture, ethnicity, or national origin. So very important to understand that definition. So what are some examples? Well, if a juror says during voir dire, and that's the time in a trial right before you pick a jury, when you're asking the prospective jurors questions, that people of Indian descent are more likely to commit crime. So that juror has exhibited or used racially discriminatory language. Judge saying during voir dire that Black women don't make good jurors in death penalty cases. The DA referring to the defendant as an animal in closing argument. Or another example would be the judge calling the defendant a monster at sentencing. Now, you would probably think this was just created, let me go back. This was just created off the top of my head. It was not. These are things that were actually said in cases in California courts. So what this law does not include is words relevant to a hate crime. So if a person, obviously that goes to one of the elements of the hate crime. So the fact that someone is going to say that or mention that or repeat that as a witness is not being directed towards the defendant in the trial. It's simply coming out as proving the prosecution's case in chief. Physical description of suspect, if the person speaking is giving a racially neutral and unbiased physical description of the suspect. So that would mean, you know, if you say, okay, well, he was a big Black man. Okay, well, that's a physical or a big man with darker skin. If you're using other animalistic-like characteristics, that's not neutral. And I don't really want to repeat those, so I'm sure you guys can use your imagination as to knowing where we can draw that line. Going to the third type of discrimination, and really 3 and 4 are the same, and this goes to really the heart of the McCleskey case. It is using statistical data. So let's say the defendant was charged or convicted of a more serious offense than defendants of other races, ethnicities, or national origins who commit similar offenses and are similarly situated. Sorry. And the evidence establishes that the prosecution more frequently sought or obtained convictions for more serious offenses against people who share the defendant's race, ethnicity, or national origin in the county where the convictions were sought or obtained. So, for example, Black and Latinos make up about 90% of adults charged with gang enhancements who are in state prison. So there are lots of gangs in California. There are Asian gangs, there are white gangs, there are white supremacy gangs, there are Armenian gangs. It runs the gamut. But when we look at the prison population and those who are charged with gang enhancements, they are 90% are Black and Latinos. So when we're talking about a disparity, you have to show two things. One, a significant difference in charges or convictions between people of different races, and that the difference is explained by the race of the defendant. And so it does require getting data, getting information on what those charges or convictions are, and then having the data, you know, to show that, okay, these are the facts that really happened. There were 3 people involved in a fight. So are those 3 people who are of you know, Latin, are they, you know, Latino? They are now being charged with assault with a gang enhancement. And let's say that there's also then a fight, an assault that happened, and there are 3 white people who are involved, and they have all just been charged with, you know, battery or just, you know, felony assault on someone. So being able to show that disparity, which also requires that there is a difference in charges. So what is the penalty going to be? Is it a misdemeanor? Is it a felony? And if the only difference, if you have, you know, sort of the same conduct, the same scenario, the only difference that would be left with would be that of race. So when we're talking about disparity, you have to have those 2 elements to show. Keep in mind, the comparison pool is people who commit similar offenses, not who is convicted versus the population as a whole. And also it's important to know that the disparity must be shown within your county, not statewide. So that's why it's so important. And I'm glad that the NAACP really wanted to bring this to the community's attention, because that's the data that we have to focus on. Now, I did show the 90% data. I believe that is statewide data. That is not countywide data, because we're talking about who are currently in state prisons. Okay, so let's look a little bit more on similarly situated. A defendant must show that he or she is similarly situated, that there isn't something that justifies a greater charge or a conviction. And a lot of times, how that is justified is a long criminal history. But again, you can show, if you have the data, you know, that someone who has the same criminal history, you know, if this is your first offense, are you being treated the same as everyone else? And that's the goal, right? That I think every office would want to be fair in the administration of justice, or there aren't particularly aggravating facts that would justify a greater charge. So understanding the similarly situated, there's a disparity part, but then there's the similarly situated, and then these are sort of the parameters to help understand that. So some areas of concern that have been brought out, which was mentioned in the creation of this bill and the lobbying for the bill and implementation, is that gang enhancements. And that's, I think, any DA's office, if they wanted to be proactive, they should look at these sorts of charges. And I think any criminal defense bar or public defender's office, this is probably an area that they have also expressed concern over. So that's gang enhancement. More than 90% of the people in California Department of Corrections custody with a gang enhancement are Black or Latino. Disparities in wobblers. So if a wobbler is a crime, a case, a charge that can be either a felony, or a misdemeanor. And so looking at, are white people more often given misdemeanors while Black and Latino people face felonies? And there can be a number of theft or fraud charges where this might be an area of concern, and also with drug offenses as well. And then the level of the charge. Consider simple possession versus possession for sale, assault versus disturbing the peace. So those are some areas of concern. Racial disparities in sentencing. Longer or more severe sentences were frequently imposed for the offense on people that share the defendant's or victim's race, ethnicity, or national origin than on defendants of other races, ethnicities, or national origins in the county where the sentences were imposed. This came to light, I would say, more often because there is a difference in the number of African Americans who get the death penalty. And I'll just use this as an example because it's what I'm most familiar with, where the victim is white. So that's why you see, that distinction between the defendants or the victim's race. And so there can be a horrible crime committed. And if the victim is, of a different race, that might impact whether or not it'll be a disparity or a higher sentence imposed. So it may not just be the defendant's race. Okay. More than 50% of people currently on death row are Black, Latinx, Asian, or Native American. Standards and terms are the same as with disparities in charges and convictions. So the difference when we're talking about racial disparities in sentencing is the disparity in sentencing, as I just mentioned again, can be based on the race of the, disparities in sentences based on race of victim key are not permitted. I'm sorry, I may have just confused myself. So I hope I didn't confuse anybody else. So we were talking about charges, and now we're in sentencing. So I may have to get back to. So we want to make sure that there are not disparities in sentences based on the race of the victim. That's not permitted under the act. So that's just actually, yeah, it's in the same thing. So areas of concern, as I mentioned, and I gave the example because that's what I'm most familiar with, is death penalty and life without parole. That's what LWOP stands for, life without the possibility of parole. Research shows significant racial disparities in use of these sentences in California. There's also disparities or areas of concern with probation and diversion. So looking at, are some people given probation less often? Is that based on their race, ethnicity, or national origin? So this is what happens when there's a violation. We're going to transition. A motion is filed under this subdivision shall describe the type of records or information the defendant seeks. So if someone believes that there has been a disparity based on sentencing or the statistics basically in the sentencing or the charges or the convictions, they have to file this motion. And in the motion, it has to have a showing of good cause. If the records are not privileged, the court shall order the records to be released. However, upon a showing of good cause, the court may permit the prosecution to redact information prior to disclosure. So again, you would think, okay, well, there's going to be all these disparities in sentences. How will we know? This is a new law, so most offices are still trying to figure this out. But basically, there has to be a motion filed for the number of whatever the crime, the current person who is raising this is seeking. So if it has been a theft, or is it an armed robbery? Is it a burglary in the first degree, or is it second degree burglary? So they would have to request those records with the racial data. And then it's now, on it's the responsibilities of, prosecution's offices now to make sure that they're collecting that data and looking at that data.
Matthews,
Yes.
we have 2 questions in the chat. Would you like to take them now?
Yes.
Okay. First from Lauren Hammond, how many cases are using RJA in the courts?
So I don't have that number for that. I do know of a few counties. I've been doing some training and working with other DA's offices around the state. So I don't know if Sacramento County has had any filed, but I do know in other jurisdictions, I believe in San Joaquin County, 3 have been filed. And I think in San Francisco, they've had 1 filed.
Thank you.
That's why I think it's so important to do this type of training. And at the end of this presentation, this was actually prepared by the League of Women Voters, most of this information that you see. And so it's available to the community. So I think everyone should share this broadly and widely so people know about it, because, everyone's still trying to figure it out. But while they're trying to figure out, DA's offices or public defenders' offices or defense attorneys, at least the community also needs to know. And was there a second question?
Yes, thank you. Betty Williams would like to know, can a gang enhancement be removed if a person is truly not in a gang?
So, that's such a good question. I probably could do a training on that as well, because the system that we use, that's been one of the criticisms, is that there's been no way to know, one, if you have been put in the system and identified as a gang member, and how do you contest it? For the California Racial Justice Act, what a person would be challenging is not whether or not they are in a gang. It would be if this gang enhancement is only added on because of my race. So they would be challenging that under, the emotion. But I do feel that, if there is relevant, relevant facts or evidence for one person to show when they've been charged, that should be presented to the prosecuting attorney by their attorney to at least request or ask that, information, to have that drop to say that, I'm not in a gang. So, but under the Racial Justice Act, the remedy is showing that it's only been put on. And perhaps in addition to the statistical information, that might be a part of a person's case, is to say, you charge 90% of, or 75% of all of your gang enhancements are with African Americans. And you're assuming because I'm African American, so that, that could be a remedy to say this is unfairly, so that it could certainly be relevant to include an emotion. Were there any other questions?
Just one more is wondering if we can receive this PowerPoint for review. Is it okay to distribute?
Yes, actually, at the end of my presentation, I'm going to give you the link where you can go and get this presentation. That's why I use it. So I have done this presentation for several different entities. So some have included prosecutors, some have included defense attorneys and police officers. But this one, I specifically included this so that you would have the same presentation that's available publicly.
Thank you.
I will include that at the end, which we're almost done. So again, the motion, relevant evidence, continue, what would that motion look like? It's based on the pitches standard, which I talked about earlier, saying good cause, meaning that you should probably prevail and get the records that you're seeking, as long as you can show a violation. And it's only for the party who has raised that. The defense must describe the records. General request is insufficient. So you just can't say, okay, give me everybody who was charged with robbery, forever, this, whatever time period it is. You want to have a little bit more description in that a little bit more specificity. Defense must make some preliminary showing to establish good cause. So that's getting a little bit more legalistic, but certainly the attorneys represented would know. And then no duty to create records that don't exist. So that's important to know, that it does not create a duty to create records. It's just to keep the records that we already have. Or should have, I should say. So the procedural issues, as I mentioned before, it's effective January 1st of this year. It's prospective only moving forward. But there is a law in the legislature that's going through now to see if it can be retroactive. Does not apply to bias in jury selection. So there was another bill, AB 3070, and that has its own remedy. So it's separate from that. It does apply in juvenile cases. The burden on the defendant to prove violation is by a preponderance. So if anybody has ever served on a jury, you know that there's a burden of beyond reasonable doubt, like, or even if you've watched like a television show, you would know that. That's the highest standard we have in the criminal legal system. By a preponderance is actually just, you know, more than like 50 plus 1, just like you just barely tipping the scale, whatever it would take. If the defendant makes a prima facie showing, entitled to a hearing. So that's the second part. You would file this paperwork of motion and then you would have a hearing. So that would be the judge. And I am not aware of any jurisdiction that has actually had a hearing on this law. So I can't speak much more as to how that would go. And then you may file a motion in the trial court. No specific time is stated. So it doesn't say, oh, like before you have to, you know, begin the case, you have to have filed it, because it may not happen until, you know, during trial, one of the witnesses says something. And one of the other, I think, stories, I didn't mention this, but there was also a case, because I mentioned a judge, a jury, also mentioned witnesses. And there was a case where there was an expert witness in the penalty phase of a trial who stated that the defendant was more likely to make crimes because he was Black. So that was not made up. And I think anybody would be able to know that your race or ethnic identity has nothing to do with your propensity to commit crimes. So this is my last slide. If you have any questions of me, you're welcome. This is my email address. Certainly email me, but this bottom one, feel free to take a screenshot or copy it. It stands for leagueofwomenvoters.org, and then Racial Justice Act Community Implementation. That's where you will find a presentation similar to this. Of course, it won't have the Prosecutors Alliance logo, and it won't have my name and information. So those are the things that are different. But you'll essentially find that information and you can share that broadly. So I will leave that up for a little bit longer, just to make sure that everyone has it. HTTPS and LWVC, which stands for League of Women Voters, California.org. And then it's Racial Justice Act Community Implementation. And you can go to that website and you will find a lot of information on the history of the act, other things that they have. I'm not sure if they have a toolkit there or not, because it's been a while since I visited that website. But you certainly will find this presentation and you can share it. If you are a part of your youth group, you can do the same thing that I just did right now. If you are a part of a, you know, women's group, you can share that information, because it's number one, it's important that our community understands from the time you have an encounter with law enforcement up until the time of sentencing, there is a law in California that confronts and works to eradicate racial discrimination in our California courts. So I have about 15 more minutes. If there are any other questions, and I have to give a caveat that I can't give legal advice, but I can try to answer what questions anyone may have.
Alana, while Mandy may be looking at any questions in the chat, I am going to also reach out to Facebook Live. If anyone on Facebook Live have questions, please put those questions in the comment on Facebook Live, and I will read the questions from the Facebook while Mandy reads any questions in the Zoom chat. So Mandy, are there any other questions?
There's one more question in the chat from Fran Stevens. In order to file a motion, the defendant would have to no longer be in custody. How is that beneficial?
So the defendant would not have to no longer be in custody. At any point, it's a remedy for trial. So they don't have to be in custody to file that. Now, if they didn't have bail and they happen to be, but during the pendency of their trial, they could still be in custody and they could raise this issue.
Excellent. There's no more questions in chat, but I did put a link to your presentation and your email address in the chat. Betty, are there any questions from Facebook?
One thing that I will just mention that, you know, certainly the courts will, and actually, you know, DA's offices are looking at this. Courts are also getting training on this. But some of the remedies that you may ask for in your motion is that, you know, if it is based on something that a witness has said or that you anticipate they may say, you may have your attorney want to not have that witness. Maybe you need to have a new trial. If it has been the juror that it later comes out that they've exhibited bias, a new trial might be in order. But the conviction may be overturned. So let's say the case has already happened and you see this, it has come through, then the conviction may be overturned for that. If it's, you know, the judge has exhibited bias, maybe you raise that motion as well. So it's a new law, we're all trying to figure it out. But the main point of this presentation is to let you know that there's this right now, there's this law that is able to confront racism when it shows up in our court.
As far as Facebook, I don't see any questions, but I do see a statement from Mr. Mark Slaughter saying, thank you, Alana, for this important presentation from our Facebook individuals. And I actually do have a question, and I don't know if it fits in, and I want to go, oh, wait a minute, there is another question. From Facebook, can DA and police departments avoid providing data by no longer collecting this data?
I certainly hope that that would not be the case. Again, there is no duty it does not create a duty, but I think if we're all interested in making sure that we have justice and no racial disparities, and I think it would be pretty obvious if that were going to be the case. So I'm encouraged by the number of offices that my organization is working with and we're training. They're really trying to be proactive in gathering this data and looking at this data. And certainly in Sacramento County, you know, the NAACP can position itself as being an advocate for a law, because certainly we don't want our law enforcement leaders trying to evade the law, but being an advocate to say, hey, this is the law now, and it's the right thing, right? We don't want to impose criminal penalties or harsher disparities. We don't want that in our criminal legal system. So I think it's great to raise that up. And then, you know, the NAACP has certainly been a voice to ensure that that doesn't happen. And I think once the community is empowered and saying, hey, we know about this law, we know what our rights are, we know that this is a very effective tool to ensure we don't have racial discrimination in our criminal legal system, that should hopefully, make sure that doesn't happen.
Thank you. We have one more question in the chat from Lynn Berkeley Baskin. She asks, is Sac County DA part of the Prosecutors Alliance?
No, the organization was founded by 4 district attorneys from other jurisdictions, but certainly they're welcome to join, and we would welcome to have them be a part of the Prosecutors Alliance. And any DA that works in that office is actually, you don't have to be an elected official. Any elected or any hired prosecutor or line deputy is welcome to join. The Prosecutors Alliance is an organization that supports prosecutors who are dedicated to reform, and it's a bipartisan. We actually have some Democrats from LA, Contra Costa County, Dinah Becton, San Francisco, Chesa Boudin, but also we have Republican, who is Tori Berber Salazar, who is the elected DA of San Joaquin County.
Excellent. We do have
another question. Yes, we have law student memberships. In fact, we just had a forum, so we can let law students know. A lot of times they think the only way that they can support criminal justice reform is by being a defense attorney. And Mark Slaughter, who's on Facebook, is one of the greatest public defenders we have. But we let them know that there can also be a place for you to do very good work in the DA's office. And we also have a relationship where we let law students know about internships that are available.
I don't see any other questions on Facebook, but another statement from Atlantis Oliver from Facebook. She was just thanking you for this very important discussion. She wasn't able to listen to everything, but from what she heard, she thought it was a very important discussion. So I wanted to share that.
And if we can put that link on maybe the Facebook page, and then anyone else who missed it, they can go and get that presentation.
Yes, we actually did have that link during your presentation and asked people to take screenshots. So I like the interaction from the Facebook audience as well as from the Zoom audience. So that tells me our message is getting out in twofold whenever we're presenting from the NAACP. I guess, Mike, if I were to ask a question, are you familiar with AB 1950?
Yes.
Because I've been in contact with our DA regarding AB 1950. But before I go into that, would you like to explain to our listening audience what AB 1950 is?
So, okay, I wasn't prepared for that part of the discussion, but I will. I don't want to say anything.
You know what? Let me take it off of you, and I'm going to bring Lynn in to do a quick piece.
I can what AB Lynn, yes.
Yes, right, because NAACP is going a different direction, and I don't want you in the crossfire. But anyway, Lynn, would you like to explain what 1950 is?
In brief, yes. Thank you, President Williams. I think the easiest way to explain 1950 is for people who are on probation longer than 2 years, their probation will be converted to 2 or 1 years. And that was as of January 1 of this year. And to date, there are 12,000 people in this county approximately who should be receiving 1950 benefits. So it's a law that came into effect. And to date, we think we have around 600 that the district attorney has said have cleared. And I know the public defender's office is really trying hard to get people cleared, but there are some issues in process. And I don't know, Betty, if you want to go into that at all.
What I will go into is that in dealing with AB 1950, a number of people don't know that these warrants that's in the portal or the funnel are no longer in existence. They're not going to prosecute individuals. And so in our meetings with the DA, it was promised that they would work, and we are scheduled to have monthly meetings with the DA to monitor this, that they were going to work to get rid of those warrants. Because right now, if a person gets stopped even out of town, out of state, that piece will pop up in the system and they'll be jailed, and our county won't go and get them because it's no longer in existence. So there's people that don't know that they have warrants in the system that we will never prosecute. And so we need to clean those out. And so our meeting with the DA is saying we want those out. And my goal is to have them all at the 0 level. We talked about 12,000 in the funnel, right? Lynn talked about 600 already being completed. So we still have thousands to go. So the goal is to have 0 by December 31st, 2021. That's my goal. And so we're working diligently with the DA's office to hopefully make that happen. But there's challenges, but we're going to work with those. Are there other, did I answer that, Lynn, or did you want to go further into that?
I mean, again, the warrants in 1950 are separate, but they affect the same people. So that's the part of the problem, is that when someone's on probation, anything can put them back in jail, a warrant, anything. And so the whole point is if you're not on probation and if the warrants are gone, then you don't have to go back to jail, unless of course there's some other reason. But I would also say that, remember, people have to pay for their own probation. So the longer people are on or don't have any kind of forgiveness from AB 1950, so the people, all those thousands of people who haven't been granted their 1950 claim yet, then they're still paying for their probation, even though they might actually not have to anymore. But by law, they have to until it's been cleared, until their 1950 has been reduced. And so there are people who are paying for things they shouldn't have to be.
And so we're working, the Greater Sacramento NAACP is working, specifically working with Lynn and LaMills with our meetings, and with Anne-Marie Schubert and 2 other individuals that we're meeting with for that piece, as well as the expungement. We have asked them to waive all the fees for expungements and for anyone to be processed, and they have agreed to do so at this point. So we're going to hold their feet to the fire. I have full confidence in Lynn Berkeley Bascom as well as LaMills Garrett to facilitate that. I am in those meetings periodically, but I really rely on my my team to support that. So because of everything you said, Alana, when it comes to social justice or criminal justice, I did not want to miss the opportunity to talk about AB 1950 and the expungement piece as well. And while I was on that, there may be other questions coming from Facebook, but I'm going to ask Mandy, are there other questions in the chat?
There are many thanks in the chat, including from Fran Stevens, who says, great information. We need to educate the community on what to expect when approached by law enforcement and what to do.
Okay. I see where Mark Slaughter also added, also formally terminating probation pursuit to AB 1950 aids in starting the expungement process sooner. Okay, thank you, Mark, for that. Great information. Any other questions? Then Elena, I'm going to ask you to do a final wrap up, and then we'll go into announcements and end it there.
Well, I will just wrap up and say thank you for this opportunity. I do think it's important to have this information to our community. And then I will also say that I am a proud card-carrying member of the NAACP. And
Okay, okay.
and you found this information to be valuable, become a member today and support the efforts of this great organization. So that's it.
Alana, you were a blessing. Your presentation was awesome. The information you provided was necessary. So we are blessed to have had you today. It was just awesome. And so also we have our screen up showing if you want to join or want more information about the NAACP, but also if you want information or would like to see this presentation, we will also put it on our YouTube channel. And so there's information regarding our YouTube channel on the screen right now. Normally it takes a couple of days before our secretaries or our tech team can get it on the YouTube channel, but they're really quick. They get it on there immediately. So please visit the Sacramento NAACP YouTube channel if you would like to see this presentation again and share with others our entire conversation. The only announcements I have, people, I guess people were still in the waiting room and we're wrapping up, so they're texting me. However, I just will remind everyone a couple of things that we will be celebrating Juneteenth next week, the 19th and the 20th. And so there's several places you can go to, but the NAACP will physically have a presence at William Land Park as well as Oak Park. And I know Sunday there's going to be a celebration in Millers Park, a gospel fest for Juneteenth. And that's also Father's Day. So I'm going to wish everyone now a happy Father's Day as we move forward. Are there any other announcements that my team has that I may have forgotten, or anyone in the Zoom presentation? Are there any announcements that you have regarding anything that's going on?
I just want to remind everybody that we are looking for committee members for the R&B Festival, and that I put my information in the chat.
Okay, and Velma, can you say your information out loud for the Facebook?
I can.
Okay.
It's my phone number is 916-271-2286, and my email address is sykesv1@gmail.com.
Thank you, Velma, for that. We're looking for vendors as well. So
That's right.
We always have an early bird special. If you're interested in being a vendor for the R&B Festival, please contact Velma for that information as well. And entertainment, we're always looking for live local entertainment as well to participate. And is there anything else?
Yes, Miss Betty, this is Lynn Berkeley Baskin. I don't know if I don't think people can see the chat. I have been putting in the opportunity to go to a website called getoffprobationsac.com, and they can check for eligibility. If they go there, it will help them connect so that they can find out if they are eligible, since our district attorney is not letting people know that they are eligible. So people don't know that this is even an opportunity for them. So this is a way that they can check for themselves by connecting with someone who can tell them.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent information. Anything else? Okay, as I wrap this up, please become a member of the Sacramento NAACP. Please visit our website at naacpsac.com or call or text our number 916-856-0155. And remember, our membership is power. We can't do it without you. Everyone is a volunteer. Trust and know that the issues that we have in the NAACP since the last administration has quadrupled with the number of issues that we have. So if wherever you are in your walk of life, I'm sure your experience we can use at the NAACP. So please come join us. So with that, I am going to end and call this Madam Secretary, could you give me the time? What time?
Yes, ma'am. It's 11:59 a.m.
Oh my goodness, a whole 60 seconds I'm giving back to you. So I'm officially ending our meeting at 11:59. Thanks again, Elena, for a great presentation. We appreciate you. Thank you.